Aeon Must Die from Limestone Games is a unique take on a classic genre that has seen an overdue resurgence over the last decade. It's a slower-paced beat-em-up that focuses on strategy. That certainly makes it interesting, but is it actually any good? Let's find out. Let me begin by acknowledging the controversy surrounding the development of Aeon Must Die. I'm not going to weigh in or consider any of that in my review because, quite frankly, I don't know enough to speak intelligently on it, and I'm not going to fake it. Plenty of other YouTubers have explained it better than I can, so if you came here hoping for a hot take, sorry to disappoint you. This video will be critiquing the game, and only the game. In this game, you play as the titular Aeon, the fallen former emperor of the entire universe. After conquering all of creation with his Void Armada, Aeon was betrayed and left to die by his most trusted general, Ivory. Now he's going to fight his way out of the pit and across the shattered highways of the planet Pantheon to take his revenge on the traitors and paint the stars with their blood. Aeon is tremendously pissed off, and everyone is going to suffer for it. The first thing that grabs your attention when you boot up Aeon Must Die is the visual style. Everything has hard neon outlines, and enemies drip with different colors of glowing energy. Bright flashes accompany every attack, and hover bikes leave a trail of light down the broken roads. High technology clashes with ancient architecture, making Aeon's empire seem impossibly old yet miraculously advanced at the same time. The first time I saw it in action, I thought Aeon Must Die was going to be a brawler set in the world of Tron. It's not, but someone should totally make that game. But I digress. The appearance is just your first clue that Aeon Must Die isn't like other beat-em-ups. And the more you play, the more apparent the differences become. For instance, your foes literally line up to fight you one at a time. Thug number 2 won't step to you until Thug number 1 has been dispatched. Thug number 3 will throw stuff from the sidelines and try to distract you, but won't get in the ring until his pals have been kicked out of it. Why does the massive and mighty Void Armada deign to do battle with its former emperor one-on-one? Cultural reasons? No, seriously. Since every superpowered soldier in the Armada can engage an army by themselves, the only way to win true glory on the battlefield is in single combat. The story of whomever fells Emperor Aeon will burn eternal, righteous, and Nova. So every henchman and boss will patiently wait their turn to get their ass kicked. It's an explanation that doesn't make any sense if you think about it too long, but it sure sounds like it does, and that's enough to get the player to start punching buttons. Even though you take on your foes one at a time, this brawler never slips into feeling like a fighting game. At least, not until you reach the boss battles. While Aeon has a more diverse moveset than the average beat-em-up protagonist, it doesn't have the depth or complexity to support competitive play. But for a single-player power fantasy, it works marvelously. Every strike feels weighty and impactful as it paints glowing streaks on the screen. Enemies hit the ground with a satisfying crunch, and brutal punches will launch them across the stage. With a bit of practice, you'll learn to manage Aeon's momentum to keep his enemies on the back foot and unable to counter as you hammer them with flaming blows. Or you would, if this game wasn't too clever for its own good. One of Aeon Must Die's most innovative features is ironically also the source of its biggest problem. You see, instead of a traditional health bar and special meter pairing, Aeon has his heat level at the bottom of the screen. As you land strikes and take hits, Aeon will build up heat that not only enhances his overall damage, but also allows him to unleash devastating special attacks wreathed in hellfire. Using special attacks and getting hit by certain enemies will sap Aeon's heat until he becomes drained. In this state, Aeon moves slower, and his flame attacks will stop working until you can build up enough heat again. This mechanic turns combat into a strategic balancing act between building up enough heat to use your special attacks, but not using so much that Aeon gets drained. And if that was all the heat level governed, it would be just one more intriguing quirk of this bizarre game. But alas, no, it is not. Unfortunately, the heat level not only empowers Aeon's attacks, but also doubles as his health bar. The system that determines how hard you hit also decides if you live or die from 1 second to the next. There's a reason those two things are usually separated. Anytime Aeon is drained or overheated, it not only affects his power, but makes him vulnerable as well. Take a hit while you're too cool or hot, and you die. Throw one too many punches and your opponent can kill you with the flick of a finger. It changes so rapidly that you can never be quite certain how much health you have left. And so you will frequently die with no idea that you were even in trouble. Just think about that for a second. A beat-em-up game where you can die from hitting the enemy too much. I can understand why this was done. It's certainly the boldest move in a game full of them, and it does force a layer of strategy over the combat. On paper, this looks like great game design. Every system hooked into each other so that every action affects everything from combat mechanics to storytelling. It's the ultimate holistic approach. But having every aspect of gameplay be so flexible yet interdependent makes it impossible to quickly read the state of the game. In the heat of battle, it is difficult to gauge how close you are to death, and how many more hits will kill you, which are vital pieces of information in a game based around combat. And every enemy has different effects on Aeon's heat level, which adds yet another layer of obfuscation. You have to consider multiple variables on the fly just to know how much health Aeon has left. But it changes so rapidly that you can never be quite certain how much more damage you can take. The way this game handles death is also as unique as it is bothersome. You see, I wasn't completely honest before. You don't play as Emperor Aeon. At least, not at first. The Nihilium, Aeon's people, must take over sentient hosts in order to survive. The player controls the host at the beginning of the game, an unnamed warrior from a powerful race known as the Starspawn. Aeon gives him guidance and incredible combat abilities, but the Starspawn is in the driver's seat. When you perform well in battle by dominating opponents without taking damage, you earn a point of respect, which can be redeemed for more power from Aeon. While the former Emperor can raise the Starspawn up every time he falls, each death chips away at the host's own sense of personal purpose. Lose all your purpose, and the Starspawn's will is subsumed by Aeon. Although still ultimately controlled by the player, Aeon takes over the Starspawn's body and narrows the focus of their quest while unleashing all of his terrible might. In a way, this functions as the game's easy mode. Once Aeon seizes control, all of his powers are unlocked and there is no longer any penalty for dying. But it also locks off the other half of the story. While the Starspawn is interested in helping others and uncovering the mysteries of the universe, Aeon is not. After he takes over, all side quests get locked off. You'll still see them listed, but any attempt to click on any of them will prompt Emperor Aeon to chastise you for wasting his time. He is only interested in the main storyline, revenging himself upon all those that betrayed him, and he will be making all of the narrative decisions without your input, until he finally sits in solitude atop a throne of corpses. If you want to know the whole story, you better get good. Try as I might, I could not get past the second boss fight with my purpose intact. But even with access to all the incredible powers of the immortal Emperor Aeon, I still couldn't beat the final boss. Despite being practically invincible myself, I was unable to defeat the final boss because her health would regenerate faster than I could do damage. Apparently, the key rests in another weird quirk of this game. While Aeon Must Die is hardly the first or only beat-em-up to feature a parry system, it is by far the most exacting. If you don't execute a frame-precise counter, you end up whiffing and get trounced by your adversary. There is no middle ground. You perform a perfect parry, or you take the hit. For most of the game, the parry can be a useful tool for breaking enemy combos, but it's hardly a requirement to progress. Until you reach the boss fights. In these battles, you will need to perform multiple perfect parries in order to build up enough heat to win, and that number increases as you climb toward the final fight. I'm sorry to have to say it, but Aeon Must Die is the Dark Souls of beat-em-ups. And that's not a compliment. Slower-paced combat that requires you to act with strategy and precision can be interesting, but is antithetical to the design philosophy of the genre it claims. Dark Souls is nothing but humbling skill checks to laboriously overcome from start to finish. A good beat-em-up doesn't require or benefit from that much calculation. There may be special moves that require some tactical thinking to deploy, but as long as you can hit the enemies more than they hit you, you'll do fine. Demanding frame-perfect counters is glaringly out of place in a game about gratuitously punching your way from one side of the screen to the other. That simplicity was always a big part of the appeal of beat-em-ups. Almost anybody with any level of experience, or none at all, with video games can play a few minutes of any brawler and quickly figure out what's going on. You don't have to learn numerous move sheets like in Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat. As long as you can keep hitting the attack button, you'll eventually reach the end of Final Fight or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but not Aeon Must Die. Even with all the fallen emperors considerable at my disposal, I could not punch and parry my way through to the end credits. That's a shame, because one of the other things that really sets Aeon Must Die apart from other entries in the genre is its attention to story. Few beat-em-up games feature a plot more complex than "the bad guy got your girl." Playing as the deposed evil emperor trying to reclaim his conquest with his fists is an intriguing narrative premise, and Aeon never runs out of amusingly dramatic ways to demand his subjects submit or die. But the majority of players will never see most of it, since more than half the story is locked behind a fairly daunting skill check. And that's really the story of Aeon Must Die in a nutshell. Lots of interesting ideas that keep getting in each other's way. Somehow, they all add up to less than the sum of their parts. But they did absolutely nail the visual aesthetic. Gotta give them credit for that. This game looks amazing. It's just too bad that playing it can't live up to all the promise of its graphics. I've read that many of the former devs have formed their own studio to develop their original vision for the game without interference, and it will be very interesting to see if they manage to improve upon the unique formula for Aeon Must Die. As it is, I can't really recommend spending your hard-earned dollars on it. Sadly, the best way to experience what this game has to offer is to watch a playthrough on YouTube.